You really thought you could marry my son? You're not good enough for him. Don't even dream about joining our family. You're just not the right person for him. Now, leave. That's what my father-in-law said to me, his voice cold and cruel. And as if that wasn't enough, my mother-in-law added, "You'd only go after Alex for his money anyway." My name is Kate. I'm 34 years old, and I've been working at the same company since I graduated from college. While many of my coworkers have moved on, starting businesses, getting married, or having kids, I've stayed, pouring all my energy into work. But that doesn't mean I'm just some lonely, career-obsessed woman. I actually have a fiancé, Alex. Alex and I met through work. At first, I thought of him as a hardworking and serious guy, but after collaborating on a few projects, we got closer. He eventually confessed his feelings, and we started dating. We've been together for a few years now, and recently, Alex proposed. While I was thrilled, I couldn't shake the nagging worries I had about our relationship. Alex is younger than me, which sometimes makes me feel self-conscious. He's always told me it doesn't matter, but I can't help wondering if it might cause issues in the future. There's also the matter of his family. His dad owns a successful business, and Alex works for him. Someday, Alex is expected to take over the company. I'd always been afraid that his wealthy, influential parents wouldn't accept me because I come from a regular family. When Alex proposed, I was overjoyed, but deep down, I worried if we could really make it work. Still, Alex's optimism always reassured me. My parents loved Alex from the moment they met him. They've been supportive of our relationship and are happy we're getting married. That gave me hope. Then came the day I was dreading, meeting Alex's parents. Their house was enormous, like something out of a movie. As soon as I saw it, I started doubting whether the clothes I had carefully chosen were fancy enough. Alex's world was so different from mine. He'd take me to upscale restaurants and book luxury hotel rooms for our trips, treating it all like it was no big deal. Yet, he never made me feel uncomfortable about my background or flaunted his wealth. "I love you for who you are, not for your looks or money," he told me once. Even though I doubted why someone like him would be interested in me, his sincerity made me believe in our love. That's why I was determined to win his parents' approval. "Don't worry, Kate," Alex reassured me. "I've already told them all about you." When we arrived, his mother greeted us at the door. "Welcome, you must be Kate," she said with a polite but distant tone. "Yes, it's nice to meet you," I replied nervously. She gave me a brief nod and led us inside. The living room was massive, and Alex's father was sitting on an expensive-looking sofa, waiting for us. Meeting his mother was nerve-wracking enough, but his father's imposing presence made me feel even smaller. "It's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Kate. Thank you for having me today," I said, trying to sound confident, though my voice trembled a little. Alex gave me a reassuring smile. "Don't be so nervous," he whispered softly. But his parents weren't smiling. They just stared at me coldly, making my nerves even worse. "Please, have a seat," his father said, motioning toward the sofa. I sat down, but almost immediately, his father said, "No." I froze. "Sorry? No to what?" I asked, confused. His mother nodded in agreement with him, her expression just as stern. "Hey, Mom, Dad, what are you doing? What's that supposed to mean? That's so rude," Alex snapped, stepping in to defend me. But his parents didn't seem to care. "How old are you?" his mother asked abruptly. "You look older." "I'm 34, I replied, bracing myself. 34? She said, raising her eyebrows. "You're 6 years older than Alex. How can we accept that? He should be with someone younger, not someone so old." Her words stung, but she wasn't done. "And at your age, isn't it too late for you to have children? We need someone who can give us grandchildren. Alex needs to marry a younger woman, that's just how it is." I had been afraid they'd bring up my age, but hearing it still hurt. "Also," she added, "you're still single at 34? That doesn't sound right. There must be a reason no one's married you yet. Maybe it's your personality?" "Mom," Alex exclaimed, furious, "that's not true. Kate is amazing, she has a great personality." His mother shot him a look. "Then why is she still single?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. I know being older might seem unusual, but I've been focused on my career. I wanted to work hard and achieve my goals. Marriage wasn't a priority for me until I met Alex. He changed that. I hoped my explanation would soften their attitude, but it didn't. "Work hard?" his mother said with a sneer. It's not like your job is anything special. Even if you work hard, it doesn't mean much if you're not making good money. Honestly, she continued, instead of working so much, maybe you should have spent more time making yourself presentable. Exactly, his father chimed in, smirking. You could still improve. Plastic surgery could help, even at your age. His mother laughed at his comment, covering her mouth. Oh, honey, you're so blunt. It was the first time I'd seen them laugh, but it wasn't kindness, it was pure mockery. I was stunned, angry, and humiliated all at once. I was speechless. You think you're good enough to marry my son? Alex's father sneered. You don't meet our standards. Don't even dream of joining this family. You're just not the right person for him. Now, leave. His words were cold and cutting. His mother wasn't any kinder. You must have tricked Alex for his money, but you can't fool us. We see right through you. That's enough, Alex shouted, his face red with anger. You can say whatever you want, but it's my life. I decide who I marry. I gently touched his arm to stop him. It's okay, Alex, I said before turning back to his parents. I understand how you feel, but it's incredibly rude to say such horrible things to someone you've just met, I said, keeping my voice calm. I don't care about your money, it means nothing to me, but if I ever became rich, I'd make sure not to act like you. With that, I stood up. There was nothing more to say. As I headed for the door, his father yelled after me, How dare you insult us, you beggar, you'll never marry my son. I turned back briefly. Don't worry, I said coolly, I have no desire to be part of a family like yours. His father's face turned red with rage. You're disgraceful. I'd love to meet the parents who raised someone like you. I didn't bother responding. I walked out, fuming at their cruelty. Outside, Alex caught up with me, breathless. Kate, I'm so sorry, I can't believe they said those things. It was horrible, but maybe it's better this way. If we'd gotten married, dealing with them would have been a nightmare, he said. Then he took a deep breath and said, I've made up my mind. I'm leaving them. I'm not taking over Dad's company, and I'm quitting my job too. I was stunned. Alex, you shouldn't rush into something like this. I'm not rushing, he said firmly. I love you, Kate. We're together because of love, not money. I don't need them or their company. But I hesitated. Let's go to your parents' house, he said, grabbing my hand. We'll tell them everything. When we got to my parents' house, they were surprised by our sudden visit but welcomed us warmly. Over tea, we explained what had happened with Alex's parents. My father listened quietly, then finally spoke. Alex, your father's company, it's called Space C, isn't it? And his name is Patrick Smith? Yes, that's right. Why? Alex asked, confused. I thought so, my father said with a nod. Come on, let's go back to your parents' house. Dad, what's going on? I asked, startled. They said they wanted to know whose daughter you are, my father replied calmly. Let's show them. I couldn't believe how determined he was, but I didn't argue. We all went back to Alex's parents' house together. This time, Alex's father opened the door. He scowled when he saw me. You again? I don't care how many times you come back. Whose daughter do you think you are, talking to me like that? Before I could reply, my father stepped forward. Patrick, he said firmly. Alex's father froze, squinting at my dad. Slowly, realization dawned on his face, and his expression changed completely. Mr. Anderson, is that you? Alex's father, Patrick, stammered, his confident demeanor crumbling. You remember now, don't you? My father replied, stepping forward. Yes, I'm her father. She's my only daughter, and I won't let anyone insult her. Have you forgotten what I told you years ago? Patrick's face turned pale. No, back when you were arrested for smoking, drinking, and even shoplifting, who covered for you? Who gave you a second chance and helped you get your life together? It was me, my father said firmly. I taught you that no one can succeed alone. We need to treat others with respect. And yet, now that your company is successful, you've forgotten all of that, haven't you? I'm sorry, Patrick muttered, clearly shaken. My father continued, his tone sharp. Being the president of a company doesn't make you better than anyone else. Success is no excuse to look down on people. Haven't I taught you that? Patrick hung his head, realizing the truth in my father's words. One more thing, Alex chimed in, glaring at his father. My boss always complains about stress. Are you harassing him, Dad? What? I'm just being tough on him because I expect more, Patrick defended weakly. My father shook his head in disappointment. You haven't changed at all. You're still the same arrogant man I knew back then. It's shameful, Patrick. He then turned to Patrick and demanded, apologize to my daughter for what you said to her. Patrick bowed his head to me. I'm sorry, Kate, he said, his voice low. Now you too, he told Patrick's wife. She hesitated but eventually followed suit, bowing and apologizing. I felt a wave of relief as they finally showed remorse. Then Alex spoke up. I'm done, Dad. I'm leaving this house and the company. I'm starting my own business and marrying Kate, just like I promised. His parents panicked. Wait, if you leave, who's going to take over? Patrick cried. You can't do this. We're counting on you, his mother added. I'm tired of being controlled, Alex said firmly. I want to prove myself on my own. Thanks for everything, but this is goodbye. He bowed politely and walked out, leaving them stunned. Later, I learned that Patrick had been one of my father's former students. True to his word, Alex quit his father's company and started his own business. I supported him while continuing my own career. His company grew quickly, and before long, we got married and began a happy life together. As for Patrick, his arrogance caught up with him. He was sued by employees for workplace harassment, which caused the company's stock price to plummet. Eventually, he was dismissed as president. Through all this, I've learned how important humility and kindness are in life. My father's wisdom has always been my guide, and I'll carry his lessons with me as I strive to live with dignity and compassion.
I start cleaning without saying much. Then my ex-husband, James, talks to me. You're not even crying. James thought I would resist and cry when he asked for a divorce. Honestly, I thought he was selfish. I wasn't the only one who stopped loving him. Well, James, you're the one who's going to have a tougher time after the divorce. Instead of crying, I could barely stop myself from laughing. What do you mean? James, my ex-husband, asked me, looking suspicious. Between you, a housewife, and me, a successful corporate worker, you'll have a harder time after the divorce. And I plan to marry someone else while you'll be alone. Well, that might be true in a regular situation, but it looks like Emma, the woman you're cheating with, isn't exactly top-notch. Wait, how do I know her name? My name is Kate, and I'm 32 years old. I'm a housewife. I met my husband James when we were both the same age at a party. We hit it off right away, becoming good friends. James worked in sales at a trading company, making a lot more money than most people our age. Because of him, I've had a comfortable life, but our marriage had a big problem. Things weren't going well. It was a serious issue. We'd been married for 7 years already. At first, we were deeply in love, spending lots of time together and sharing meals, even when James was busy with work. But that love faded away. Take care. What about dinner? I don't need it. I'll eat out. You can go to bed first. I'll be home late. All right, got it. When we first got married, he used to say, eating together with you, Kate, is my greatest happiness. But now, it's normal for him to come home after midnight, finding me already asleep, and leaving for work without a proper talk in the morning. It's like being ignored by a teenager going through puberty. When these days became the norm, I noticed some changes in James. Did he always use this hair product? And now he has a whole bunch of skincare products and cologne. Before, he didn't care much about how he looked. He mostly wore suits and didn't have many casual clothes. But suddenly, he's buying expensive brand-name outfits. I wouldn't mind if he just decided to start caring more about his appearance. I always thought he should. But the reason for this change seems strange. Watching James closely, I started feeling suspicious. He began using his phone in secret, even taking it with him to the bathroom and shower. He used to leave it lying around, and I almost sat on it a few times, worrying I might damage it. Why has he suddenly changed so much? As James's behavior continued, my suspicions grew stronger. Was he cheating whenever he came home late? But I had no solid proof, just doubts. Despite the distance in our relationship, a part of me still wanted to believe in him. So the idea of my suspicions being true terrified me. I tried to act like everything was okay, hoping to improve our relationship. I tried to talk more and suggested going out together, but every time I reached out, I was met with indifference. I guess it's understandable. After 7 years of marriage, our relationship had been shaky for a while. Despite my efforts, feeling ignored made me feel incredibly lonely. With all this happening, my emotions started to wear thin. One night, I couldn't hold it in any longer, and I finally decided to confront James. "Hey, are you cheating on me?" I finally asked to James. He just looked at me, not saying a word. "Come on, say something. Are you?" He stayed silent for a moment. Then, without a word, he got up from the couch and came over to where I was sitting at the table. He lowered his head towards me. "I'm sorry, Kate. I want a divorce." I was speechless, completely caught off guard by his unexpected confession. Ignoring my stunned silence, he went on. "I've fallen in love with someone else. I want to start a new life with her." How could he say something so selfish without even thinking? What about our 7 years together? I had a feeling there was another woman, but I never expected him to drop this bombshell so suddenly. All my efforts to fix our relationship seemed pointless. Was the man I fell in love with really this heartless and selfish? When we first met, I thought he was the most amazing person in the world. I couldn't find the words to say, my mind swirling with these thoughts. Then my husband said something that made me doubt if I heard him right. The truth is, she's pregnant with my child. I want to be with her for our child's future. I felt like everything was spinning, like I was about to collapse. Everything around me seemed to turn white. We hadn't had a child in our 7 years together. We hadn't even been using protection. In fact, we had been actively trying to conceive and had sought infertility treatments. Despite our efforts, we couldn't have a child. Medical reports showed my husband had fertility issues, but he always expressed his desire for a child. So despite the challenges, we never stopped trying. I always did my best to meet his expectations. Lately though, our relationship had lost its spark, and we stopped trying to conceive. It seems his decision to divorce was largely influenced by the fact that he was having a child with his mistress. I've always wanted a child, especially to show my mom her grandchild soon. You understand, right, Kate? So please, let's divorce. My mother-in-law had been seriously ill and hospitalized for the past 2 years. I understood his urgency to give her a grandchild. But to have a child with another woman instead of his wife, it was devastating. I wanted a child too, which is why I underwent fertility treatments. I thought we were in this together, sharing the pain of infertility. Do you even realize how selfish you're being? I yelled at him in frustration, but James just looked down, apologizing. It felt like he was waiting for the storm to pass, which only made me angrier. What kind of woman is she? Just because she's pregnant with your baby, I'm not ready to accept a divorce. I pressed James to tell me more about the woman he was involved with, but he insisted, "I'm sorry, but please respect her privacy." What? How selfish can you be? As your wife, I have a right to know. Tell me everything. But no matter how much I pushed, James refused to share any significant details about her. "She's 2 years younger than you, Kate. That's all. She works with me." What a joke. He must really care about her. Despite my persistence, James wouldn't give any real answers. For a few days we argued about it, but I adamantly refused to agree to a divorce on James's terms. I didn't want to give in to him so easily. Throughout our discussions, James kept apologizing and bowing his head. "Please, I no longer have feelings for you. What's the point in staying married? Even my mother knows about this and she's fine with it." Apparently, James had already spoken to my mother-in-law about our situation. That shook me. While my relationship with my mother-in-law had been strained lately, I thought we were still close. Yet, James kept dropping bombshells one after another. "I've already given her an engagement ring. We're planning to live together soon. All that's left is for us to get a divorce," James revealed. I felt dizzy, like I was going to faint. My husband James was actually serious about leaving me for the woman he was cheating with, but I still couldn't bring myself to agree to a divorce. This tug-of-war between James and me went on for almost a month. When James seemed to have run out of patience, he begged on his knees. "I can't do this anymore. Please just agree to the divorce. Our relationship has been broken for a long time. There's no point in dragging it out like this. Please divorce me," my husband begged, his forehead pressed against the floor in a pleading posture. I had been resisting for nearly a month. Maybe it was time to accept the inevitable and agree to the divorce. "Fine, let's go through with the divorce. But I'm asking for alimony and my fair share of our assets." "I understand. I'm prepared for that," I said. We discussed the alimony in detail, and I requested $50,000. It was more than usual, But considering I had invested a lot in our home during our 7 years of marriage, I felt it was fair compensation. James agreed to my terms. We also decided on asset division, with me receiving half of the balance in our joint account and him covering the cost of my relocation. Then, I signed the divorce papers that James had prepared. As I filled out the paperwork, my heart was filled with various emotions. Even though our love had faded, we had shared a life together under the same roof for 7 years, and it was all coming to an end with just a single piece of paper. Without any lingering feelings for James, I submitted the divorce papers to the city hall the next day, and our mutual divorce was finalized. Soon after, James wasted no time in marrying the other woman. Whether she rushed him or not, with a baby on the way, he probably wanted to be with her as soon as possible. I was honestly taken aback by how quickly he moved on, especially considering I hadn't even finished sorting through our shared belongings in the apartment. Feeling the need to hurry and pack up my things, I went to the apartment we used to share. As luck would have it, our timing overlapped, and James was also there when I arrived. Without exchanging many words, I immediately started tidying up the space. James, my ex-husband, finally spoke up. "You're not shedding a tear, huh?" It seemed James had expected me to resist and cry when he pleaded for a divorce on his knees. Honestly, I had always thought he was quite self-centered, and he wasn't the only one who had fallen out of love. Maybe because I had been refusing the divorce for so long, James might have assumed I still had feelings for him. It seemed like a misunderstanding on his part. But the reason I hadn't agreed to the divorce right away was because I was stubbornly determined to investigate his mistress on my own terms, rather than simply going along with James's wishes. "Well, James, you're the one who's going to have a tougher time after the divorce, not me." Instead of crying, I could barely hold back laughter. "Huh? What do you mean?" My ex-husband James looked at me suspiciously. "Considering you're a corporate hotshot and I'm just a housewife, you'll have more challenges. And since I'm planning to remarry, you'll be on your own." Well, in a normal situation that might be true. But it seems like Emma, the woman you're cheating with, is quite trashy. Wait, how do you know her name? You thought I was just being stubborn and refusing our divorce. I continued, watching James's face pale. I had hired a private investigator to look into her all this time. In just a few weeks, I had gathered a lot of information about his mistress. Firstly, her name is Emma. She's 27 years old, divorced twice, and currently living at her parents' home. Emma seems to have a questionable reputation, constantly involved with different men. She even lost custody of her child due to being a bad influence. Indeed, the investigator saw her entering a motel with other men. Just to be sure, I had asked for photos as evidence. When I shared all the information and showed him the pictures, James collapsed on the spot. "No way. Emma can't be like that. She only had eyes for me, and we were planning to build a happy family." James seemed deeply in love with Emma. It was frustrating, but this woman indeed seemed to have a talent for charming men. "What? You're lying. This is all made up to shake me up. This photo must be fake," James protested. It was exasperating to see him so foolishly blinded by love. "Believe it or not, it's up to you. But even now, your mistress is involved with other men. Or should I say, your new wife? Maybe the child isn't even yours." James's face grew even paler. "No way, not Emma." These were the findings from the private investigators, so the possibility of being deceived was high. Perhaps among her multiple boyfriends, James was the one who made the most money, which is why she chose him to marry. Quite an honor, isn't it? Even if the child may not be biologically yours, you wanted a child anyway, so raise your child well. I delivered this final blow to James and left the apartment with my belongings. After a while, I received an email from him. He wanted to get back together. As I suspected, the child Emma had given birth to wasn't James's. When he confronted Emma, she retorted, "I didn't know whose child it was until it was born." But since James was already married to Emma, legally he had to raise the child she gave birth to as his own. James had just been a money tree for her. As proof, when paying alimony to me, James had covered Emma's portion too. So, in total, he paid me $80,000. Furious, James confronted Emma, but she simply said, "You seemed happy to serve me." Eventually, she left the child behind and disappeared. James called me, begging, "You were right. I was deceived. I'm really sorry. I want to start over again." But I was just disgusted. You think I'm going to come back to you just because you're saying those things? You had an affair, that's a fact. You betrayed me, that's also a fact. You need to accept reality. I hung up the phone after that. Later, I heard from a mutual acquaintance that James handed over the child Emma left behind to her parents, telling them to take responsibility. Emma's parents responded, "That's troublesome. You raise the child." But James stubbornly refused, saying, "I have no obligation to raise a child that's not biologically mine." He submitted DNA test results to prove the child wasn't his and revoked his acknowledgement of the child. Emma's parents apparently didn't know the child wasn't James's. After they found Emma, they took her back home and are forcing her to raise the child in semi-captivity. They're keeping a close eye on her to prevent her from freely meeting other men. Meanwhile, even though my ex-husband James has cut all ties with Emma, he paid me $80,000 in alimony, including Emma's portion, which wiped out his savings. He's been demanding Emma repay the alimony he covered for her, but she doesn't seem to care and claims she can't pay back what she doesn't have. Sadly, James has become a divorced man with no savings, unable to focus on his work, and making many mistakes. Now he's been reassigned to a rural area with no chance of promotion, living a lonely life. On the other hand, I've moved back to my parents' house and am helping with their farming business. After a few years, I fell in love and married a local fisherman. We don't have children, but I'm happily spending every day with my husband, who is always kind to me. Hi, I'm Gloria, a 36-year-old office worker balancing the ups and downs of daily life. My husband Matthew and I recently celebrated our 8th wedding anniversary, and almost immediately after we tied the knot, we became parents. Our daughter, the brightest part of our lives, is about to turn 8. Over the years, there have been some challenging moments in our marriage, but the joy our daughter brings to our lives is irreplaceable, and on the whole, I find happiness in our family dynamic. That said, like any family, we have our struggles, and for me, one area of tension lies in the way we handle finances. Matthew has a strong passion for his hobbies, and while he doesn't go overboard, he often spends a sizable portion of his income on them. I've always stressed the importance of him contributing a fixed minimum to our household expenses, funds that cover the essentials like utilities and groceries. But since his contributions only cover the basics, I find myself constantly working to tighten our budget elsewhere. My salary goes towards rent, our daughter's school fees, and saving for her future education, and this constant juggling of finances adds a lot of stress to my life. Another source of strain comes from the uneven division of household labor. Despite both of us working full-time, Matthew rarely helps with the chores. I've brought it up countless times, hoping for a more balanced approach to maintaining the house. Juggling work, finances, and home upkeep is exhausting, and I often wish the responsibilities were shared more fairly. Despite this, I stay positive, focusing on creating a warm, nurturing environment for our daughter. As she grows, I hope we can show her the importance of teamwork and responsibility, making adjustments as we go to better support each other. It's not a perfect situation, but I'm committed to making the best of it. When I ask Matthew to help around the house, his go-to excuse is that the tasks would take him too long, and it's easier for me to handle them myself. Over time, I've taken on all the household responsibilities alone. We had our daughter soon after getting married, but Matthew was often absent when it came to her upbringing. He expressed concerns about accidentally hurting her, which meant I carried most of the parenting load. As the years went by, my dissatisfaction with him grew, but we had been together for 8 years and had a growing child. I wasn't sure if initiating a divorce when our daughter was approaching puberty was the right decision. I told myself that maybe it was normal for couples to feel disconnected after many years together and that no family was without its flaws. But a recent incident with my sister-in-law made me seriously reconsider our marriage. One day, she showed up at our door looking visibly distressed. "Gloria, I'm sorry, but I need to stay here for a bit. There's been an issue with Ryan," she said, clearly upset. I was worried and asked if something had happened with her husband. She hesitated and tried to change the subject, which left me feeling uneasy and desperate for more information. Later that night, when Matthew returned from work and we had put our daughter to bed, we all sat down to talk. So, what happened? I asked, looking at my sister-in-law. I asked her what had happened, and she hesitated before replying. Well, Ryan just snapped. He said, out of nowhere, that he wants a divorce. I was stunned. I had always thought of Ryan as a calm, stable, and sincere person, so this sudden outburst didn't make sense. I pressed her for more details, asking, why did he get so angry? She seemed defensive, her voice rising with panic. Why are you asking me that? She retorted. A thought crossed my mind. Perhaps she had done something to provoke him. Her avoidance only fueled my concern. What do you mean? Why am I asking? I responded. Why are you defending him? Are you involved with him or something? Her accusation caught me off guard, but I quickly denied it. Of course not, I said. I'm not involved with Ryan. Matthew, overhearing the exchange, laughed off her suggestion. That's impossible, he said. She barely has time for anything outside of her responsibilities. And besides, she always leaves her phone out in the open. Despite my husband's defense, frustration bubbled inside me. My life was a constant whirlwind of work, household chores, and caring for our daughter. After long days, I barely had the energy to check my phone, let alone engage in anything like an affair. Still, my sister-in-law insisted she didn't know why Ryan was upset. We agreed it would be best to talk directly to him to clear things up. A little later, Ryan arrived at our house. My sister-in-law, still uneasy, decided to step out and give us some space. Ryan, looking apologetic, expressed regret over the turmoil he'd caused. I'm really sorry for all the trouble, he said earnestly. His calm demeanor confirming my belief that he wasn't the type to make rash decisions. Ryan, I just don't understand, I said, pressing him. You've only been married for a year. Isn't asking for a divorce a bit extreme? There has to be a reason. Ryan took a deep breath before revealing the shocking truth. The reason is that she spent all of my savings, $110,000, without telling me. I felt the air leave the room. You saved $110,000 and it's all gone in just 1 year, I said, my voice betraying my disbelief. That's about $5,500 every month. How did that happen? Ryan explained that he had been carefully managing their finances, allocating just enough from his monthly income to cover all their living expenses. The entire $110,000 had been spent entirely on non-essential personal expenses, luxuries, and entertainment. No wonder you're upset, I said, empathizing with him. Anyone would be furious in your shoes. I couldn't help but think of my own situation with Matthew's tendency to overspend. It was almost as if this was a family trait. With the revelation of the massive financial strain, I suggested, if she doesn't make an effort to repay that $110,000, maybe you should seriously think about separating, especially since there are no kids involved. Ryan nodded, taking my advice to heart, but then Matthew surprised me by chiming in. I'll make sure my sister pays you back, he said confidently. I was taken aback by his sudden certainty. How could he be so sure? Ryan looked at him, clearly appreciative of the support. I would appreciate that, thank you. With that, we had reached what seemed like a tentative resolution, though I knew the situation was far from over. As Ryan left, my sister-in-law returned to the house, the weight of everything still hanging in the air. I confronted her immediately. Ryan mentioned that he used up all of his savings, $110,000. She quickly became defensive. I used it for living expenses, she retorted, her tone sharp. I tried to explain the situation, but she wouldn't hear it. Ryan had already made it clear that he kept a separate account for everyday expenses. Her reply was dismissive, almost scornful. You don't know anything, so just shut up. Her harsh tone wasn't a surprise. She often belittled me during our conversations. But this time, her complete lack of remorse, coupled with her dismissive attitude toward the mess she created, made it all too clear. Ryan might truly be better off pursuing a divorce. She refused to acknowledge the seriousness of what she'd done, and there was no indication that she planned to fix anything. It painted a grim picture for the future of their marriage. During our heated exchange, Ryan mentioned that he might consider forgiving her if she repaid the full $110,000. My sister-in-law, seemingly cornered by her own actions, lamented, "How can I pay back that much? I'm just a housewife." I responded firmly, "If you can't pay it back, you shouldn't have spent his money in the first place." The tension in the room thickened, and then, almost as if she had an epiphany, my sister-in-law turned to me with a gleam of hope in her eye. "Relax, Gloria. We've got money, right? "You've got $220,000 saved up, so no worries, right?" she said, sounding almost victorious, as if she found a miraculous solution. I was thrown off completely. "Wait a minute, how do you even know about my savings, Matthew?" I asked, stunned. I had never shared that I'd saved that amount for our daughter's future tuition. Matthew, appearing unfazed, casually admitted, "I found it when I went through your parents' house. It was in the second drawer of the closet in your room." I was speechless. "You went through my things without asking. That's unbelievable. We're married, but that doesn't mean my personal belongings are up for inspection," I protested, feeling utterly betrayed. Ignoring my outrage, Matthew continued, "Your sister-in-law is in trouble. Give us your savings to help her out." I was incredulous. "I'm not handing over that money. It's for our daughter's future. If you think $110,000 should just be given away, why don't you figure out a way to pay her back?" Matthew didn't hesitate. He reached into a drawer and pulled out divorce papers. "I've had these ready just in case something like this happened," he said coldly, as if he'd been preparing for this moment all along. My frustration boiled over. "You've got some nerve trying to manipulate the situation like this," I snapped. "That's exactly what I've been wanting to say to you," I added, my voice shaking with the weight of my anger. Then, with chilling finality, Matthew filled out the papers and said, "I'm serious. We can get a divorce anytime you want." To my shock, my sister-in-law, watching the drama unfold with an almost gleeful grin, piped up. "Well, I'll be one of your witnesses," she said, scribbling her name on the form as if she were signing a trivial document. "You can either pay me the $110,000 or we can get a divorce," Matthew threatened, as though he were cornering me into a choice. I was astounded by their boldness and manipulative tactics. But rather than giving them the satisfaction of seeing how deeply their words cut, I feigned compliance, allowing the moment to pass without escalating things further. The next day, I prepared myself for whatever came next. I decided to take control of the situation and invited some important figures, my in-laws and Ryan, to our home. When they arrived, Matthew was immediately baffled. "Ryan, why are you here?" "Mom, Dad, what's going on?" he asked, his confusion palpable. Before Matthew could say anything more, his father interjected, his voice calm but firm. "Matthew, don't embarrass yourself any further." He then turned to me and added, "Gloria, I'm truly sorry about my son and daughter's foolish behavior." Ryan also spoke up, his tone sincere. "I must apologize to Gloria," he said. Their apologies were like a bombshell, but the tension didn't subside. Matthew, still bristling, tried to assert himself. "Why are you two apologizing? You should be quiet." Ignoring him, his father continued. "We went through your room, Matthew, and we found stacks of expensive bags and jewelry." His mother added, "Ryan asked us to look into it, and it's clear you've had a habit of hiding expensive purchases from us since you were young." The revelations hit like a ton of bricks, and Matthew's deceit became undeniable. His mother, facing the mounting evidence, finally said, "I can't stay married to you anymore." The tide had turned dramatically. The extent of Matthew's financial misconduct had been exposed, and my earlier concerns now seemed justified in an entirely new light. The situation took another turn when it came out that my sister-in-law had falsely claimed she used the $110,000 for living expenses. "I want you to pay me back the $110,000, Ryan demanded firmly, to everyone's shock, especially Matthew's. "I've already taken steps," Ryan continued. "Matthew, you're getting a divorce too." Gloria already filled out the divorce papers, and I signed as a witness. We just submitted them together. My sister-in-law's declaration was defiant. Matthew was furious. "I won't allow that," he exclaimed. I couldn't hold back my frustration. "You won't allow it? What are you talking about? You're the one who's been threatening divorce and trying to make Gloria, who has nothing to do with your sister's debts, take responsibility for everything. You are despicable." "Gloria is my wife, not your property," I shot back. "She wasn't born into your family. She's essentially a stranger to you. You should show her more respect and care." Ryan chimed in, his voice steady. "I'm with Gloria on this. You're completely out of line." Faced with such a direct and reasonable argument from my parents-in-law, Matthew was left speechless, his head lowered in shame. My sister-in-law, visibly shaken, stood by silently, overwhelmed by the turn of events. Thankfully, my parents-in-law helped steer the conversation, assisting both Ryan and me in navigating through the divorce without further complications. In an attempt to make amends, my sister-in-law sold off as many luxury goods as she could, raising about $45,000 to repay Ryan. The remaining $30,000 was covered by my parents-in-law, who would now closely supervise her repayment of the debt. This arrangement brought some balance and ensured she would be held accountable for her actions, while allowing Ryan and me to move forward and start fresh. After the divorce, my sister-in-law found herself in a difficult financial position. She now works tirelessly from dawn till dusk, struggling to pay off the debt she incurred from mismanaging her former husband's savings. Her days are long and exhausting, leaving little room for rest. As for my ex-husband, the divorce forced him to make some significant changes. I arranged for him to provide child support, which he has been able to pay consistently despite his circumstances. However, I've heard through the grapevine that he continues to live alone in a modest apartment. His salary, though decent, is stretched thin by his rent, living expenses, and child support payments. Eventually, the financial strain forced him to move to a cheaper apartment. Sadly, his long-standing habit of unnecessary spending hasn't helped, and despite living in a more affordable place, he often finds himself broke with no savings to fall back on. This financial instability will likely make it difficult for him to enter another relationship anytime soon. Meanwhile, I've returned to my parents' home with my daughter. Being back under their roof has helped stabilize our lives, allowing me to focus on the future. My parents have been incredibly supportive, especially in helping with childcare while I work. This support has been crucial in allowing me to regain my footing after the divorce. I'm working hard, not just to meet our day-to-day needs, but also to save for my daughter's future. I want her to have every opportunity to pursue her dreams without financial constraints. This is a new chapter for us, and I'm determined to make it a successful one. I plan to continue sharing our journey, hoping that our story might inspire or help others facing similar situations. If you find our story engaging and want to follow our journey through this new phase of our lives, please subscribe to the channel. Your support means so much to me, and I look forward to connecting with you in future videos. Thank you for watching. Hello, I'm Donna, a 38-year-old woman who has recently freed herself from a stifling marriage. The decision to part ways with my husband felt like reclaiming my true freedom. Allow me to share the story of my ex-husband, Michael. Michael and I first met through a blind date set up by a mutual friend. From the beginning, he was undeniably handsome and possessed an irresistible charm. He seemed to be everything I had ever wanted in a partner. We shared numerous interests and our conversations flowed effortlessly. For the first 7 months, we enjoyed a casual dating phase, taking turns planning exciting and enjoyable activities. Once we officially became a couple, our dynamic outings continued, and a year later, we moved in together. It was during this time that I became aware of Michael's unstable financial situation. Despite offering advice to help him advance professionally, he rarely took it seriously. Nevertheless, he earned enough to meet his needs, and I was prepared to support us both financially. 3 years into our relationship, we married and a year later, decided to buy a house. I secured the mortgage in my name alone due to my superior credit score, a decision that now seems fortuitous. However, 4 years into our marriage, I noticed a troubling shift in Michael's behavior. He became increasingly demanding and stopped contributing to household chores, claiming to be too busy with work. Despite my understanding and efforts to manage everything on my own, the burden became overwhelming. I addressed the issue with Michael, who would briefly promise to improve, but we soon fell back into old patterns. I tolerated this out of love and a desire to support him fully, but it took a toll on our relationship, especially in terms of leisure and enjoyment. It was under these strange circumstances that I discovered Michael's infidelity. I stumbled upon his affair quite unexpectedly. He had left his phone unlocked while taking a shower. I had no intention of snooping. I just wanted to charge his phone when a notification caught my eye. It was a message from a woman named Isabella, asking Michael how long it would be until he left his pathetic wife to meet her at a nearby motel. The shock and heartbreak were immediate. I couldn't believe Michael was capable of such betrayal. Our marriage had seemed solid, with Michael always greeting me warmly and us rarely arguing. The pain was overwhelming, a mix of tears and nausea as my world seemed to crumble. In that moment, I knew I had to confront the situation head-on. I left Michael's phone exactly as I found it, with the message still open, ensuring he would know I had seen it. When Michael emerged from the shower and saw his phone, he instantly realized I was aware of the affair. He tried to evade the conversation, but I was determined to address it. "I know about the affair," I said. "Let's talk about it." "I don't think we should," he replied. "Who is she? I'm sure you saw enough to know her name. When did it start?" "A year ago," he said, avoiding eye contact. "Can we not do this right now?" "Why did you start seeing her?" I pressed. "Please, let's not do this," he pleaded. "Don't call me babe." "Tell me," I insisted. "I don't know," he said. "I guess I just missed the thrill of someone new, someone on the same wavelength as me." "So not on the same wavelength as you?" I asked. "Well, I wouldn't say that exactly," he said. "It's just that you've become a bit dull. You never want to go out, you're always tired, and our social life, and even our life in the bedroom, has faded." "You realize I'm always tired because I handle all the chores and work full-time," I retorted. "You've never once offered to help." "That's just your role as my wife," he said. "I told you to stay at home, but you refused." "That still doesn't excuse you from contributing to the house," I said. This confrontation marked a turning point, making it clear that our views on marriage and responsibilities were vastly different. His words and actions shattered the trust and respect I thought we had. "I can do whatever I want," Michael declared, his words slicing through the tension in the room. "If that means having an affair for some fun, then so be it." His distorted view of freedom within our marriage was startling and painful. I had hoped we could discuss this and possibly repair our relationship, but his stance made it clear that was no longer an option. "I don't think anything will change," he continued dismissively. "You're just too dull. I'm happy to stay married, but I'll keep seeing Isabella. I need some space from you." His tone was cold and unapologetic as he retreated to another room, leaving me to grapple with the weight of his words. Michael's disregard and detachment were devastating. He had reduced me to a mere role within our home, despite never having previously held such outdated views on gender roles. It was apparent that he had been influenced by podcasts promoting the idea that women were too outspoken and needed to be controlled. Witnessing his transformation into someone who not only embraced these harmful ideas but also failed to acknowledge their damage was heart-wrenching. Soon after, I heard the front door slam. Michael had left to meet Isabella. Overcome by a profound sense of abandonment and betrayal, I could no longer bear the solitude or the storm of emotions crashing over me. In my distress, I called my best friend Judy. She answered right away, sensing the urgency in my voice. Within moments, she was at my door with comforting hugs and tubs of ice cream. She didn't press for details. Instead, she held me as I cried. When I finally composed myself enough to speak, I shared the painful revelation with her. "Michael is cheating on me, Judy. It's true." "Are you sure?" she asked, concern etched on her face. "Absolutely," I replied. His phone was unlocked, and I saw a message from a woman asking when he was leaving his pathetic wife to meet her. "What did you do?" Judy inquired. "I confronted him," I said, tears welling up again. He barely wanted to talk about it. Judy stayed with me through the night, offering silent, steadfast support as I faced the harsh reality of my crumbling marriage. As we sat together, the gravity of my situation began to sink in, and though the future remained uncertain, I was grateful for her unwavering presence. I knew I wasn't alone anymore. I finally confronted Michael and uncovered the painful truth. He had been cheating on me for a year. His excuse was that I had become too boring, always too tired and never up for anything fun. Despite managing almost everything at home, he dismissed my efforts, insisting it was simply my role as his wife. Well, if that's the role of a wife, then his role as a husband should have been more honorable, I told Judy, still reeling from the shock. Instead, here he is, cheating on me. Judy shook her head in disbelief. "That's just a pathetic excuse. Did he even apologize?" "Not for a second," I replied. "He just blamed me and chose to spend the night with her. Honestly, Judy, if I had to face him now, I don't know what I'd do." "So, what are you thinking of doing next?" Judy asked. "I'm not sure. Michael mentioned he's fine staying married, but there's no way I can continue like this. Listen, Judy said, why don't you stay with me until you figure things out? I'll help you through everything. That would be amazing. Thank you so much, Judy. I really appreciate your support. We spent the rest of the evening trying to unwind, watching our favorite movies. It was a welcome distraction, but the reality of my situation lingered in the back of my mind. The next morning, Judy helped me pack some things to bring to her place. Once settled in at her home, curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to look up Isabella. I still had access to Michael's social media on my phone, a privilege I had never abused before because I trusted him completely. I discovered that Michael had muted notifications for messages from Isabella, which explained why the affair had remained hidden until now. It turned out that Isabella was a coworker of his, actually someone who reported directly to him. She was 38 years younger than me and 11 years younger than Michael. Just that revelation alone was enough to make my stomach churn. This discovery solidified my decision. I needed to divorce Michael. I couldn't endure the betrayal, nor could I live with someone who saw me as merely an obligation. With Judy's unwavering support, I began taking steps to reclaim my life and dignity. Before filing for divorce, I needed to sort out a few things. Judy and I spent time strategizing not only about the logistics of the separation, but also about ensuring that Michael would face appropriate consequences for his betrayal. My first priority was to protect my finances. I transferred all the money I had contributed to our joint account into a personal account, ensuring that Michael had no access. In the days that followed, as I prepared to file for divorce, I heard nothing from Michael. It was a painful reminder of how little he valued our relationship. When I eventually returned home to collect more of my belongings, I found Michael lounging on the couch. His reaction to seeing me was as predictable as it was irritating. "Where have you been? Why haven't you told me where you were?" he demanded, his voice tinged with a feigned concern that barely masked his real detachment. "Why should I explain myself to you? You haven't called once. Don't pretend to care now," I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "I'm sorry, but discovering your infidelity because you found me too boring doesn't exactly inspire politeness," I added with a touch of sarcasm. Michael seemed taken aback, but he quickly redirected the conversation to finances. "I noticed you withdrew a large sum from our joint account," he said, trying to sound casual but clearly concerned. "Yes, I took back my money," I replied. "Why should I let you squander what I've worked hard to earn?" He frowned and said, "What do you think you're doing? You need to put that money back." "Or what?" I challenged. "Are you going to kick me out, move in with Isabella, and have your sister take my place here?" I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of his threats. "Put the money back in 3 hours, or I'll make sure everything changes by tomorrow," he said, his tone growing menacing. I responded with silence, walking past him to our room. I quickly packed up the rest of my clothes and essentials, leaving him to stew in his frustration. Back at Judy's place, I recounted the entire encounter. Judy was furious on my behalf and insisted we consult a lawyer immediately. Fortunately, she knew someone who could help. We met with her lawyer friend, who first asked about the house. I explained that both the mortgage and the house title were in my name alone, a result of my well-paying job in a niche field. This detail was crucial as it meant I had significant leverage in the upcoming legal proceedings. With Judy's support and the lawyer's guidance, I felt better prepared to face the challenges ahead. Since I earned significantly more than Michael, it made sense for me to handle the mortgage and purchase the house, establishing it entirely in my name. This financial arrangement was straightforward and practical given our respective incomes. I had also taken care of everything the house needed. When I consulted with my lawyer about the impending divorce, he reassured me that the house would legally remain in my name, which lifted a weight off my shoulders. He also explained that if Michael's sister, Karen, moved in without my consent. Despite the tension, Michael informed me the next morning that Karen had moved in, citing my failure to reverse the money transfer. I kept the conversation brief, which only fueled his anger. He ended the call abruptly. Following my lawyer's advice, I began recording all conversations with Michael to maintain a reliable record for potential court use. My strategy moving forward was straightforward. I would issue Karen an eviction notice. If she complied, that would end the matter. If not, I was prepared to pursue legal action. Given our strained history, I anticipated it wouldn't be simple. Karen had always shown a peculiar hostility towards me, frequently trying to overshadow me in petty ways. She even attempted to disrupt our wedding and competed with me over trivial matters. Our relationship had deteriorated to the point where I had to limit contact with her. Michael, overly protective and indulgent toward his sister, often placed me in uncomfortable positions. Karen's resentment grew when she realized she couldn't outshine me, leading her to steal from our home during her visits. I would notice missing items, designer clothes, shoes, and skincare products. Michael urged me to overlook these incidents, rationalizing that Karen's frugal lifestyle justified her taking some luxuries. I strongly disagreed and eventually banned her from visiting our home altogether. Although neither Michael nor Karen was pleased with this decision, Michael was powerless to challenge it due to the legal standings and my control over the property. Determined to protect my interests and ensure a fair resolution to our marital breakdown, I was ready to stand my ground. Having had enough of Karen's antics and theft, I explained the extent of her actions to Michael. He understood that the damage was significant, but Karen continued to provoke me. One day, she called to gloat, "Hello, Donna. Guess where I am right now?" I remained calm. "Michael told me you've moved in." "That's right," she boasted. "I have this huge, glorious house all to myself, something you don't." "I still do have the house," I replied. "I've already sent an eviction notice your way, and you have 4 days to move out." She laughed derisively. "An eviction notice from you? Like I'm going to follow through with that. This is my brother's house, and he told me I can stay here, so I will." "It's not his house, Karen," I said firmly. "Regardless of what Michael told you, the legal documents show that the property is mine." Yeah, marital property or whatever, but he has all the power here," she insisted, misunderstanding the situation. "He decided this was the best thing to do." "You really can't stop talking, can you?" she snapped, trying to hurt me further. "I see why my brother chose someone else." "Fine," I said. "I have nothing more to say. Goodbye." I ended the call, but not before hearing Karen's spiteful laughter. If she didn't vacate within the 4-day deadline, I was fully prepared to take her to court. I had all the legal backing I needed. Unsurprisingly, Karen informed Michael of our conversation, and within an hour, he called me enraged. He questioned my audacity to issue an eviction notice. I chose not to respond to his anger. In the next 4 days, 2 significant events unfolded. First, I had the divorce papers served to Michael, and he shockingly decided to contest them. Second, Karen had still not moved out. True to my word, I had a court summons delivered to her. Legally, she was now considered a squatter. When Karen received the summons, she was visibly shocked to learn that the house was in my name, not her precious brother's. She confronted me, accusing me of trickery. I responded firmly, "I gave you ample warning and time to leave. I even sent you a formal eviction notice." The reality of her situation was finally dawning on her. I was ready to uphold my rights, no matter what. Karen's refusal to heed my warnings led her to face the consequences in court. My lawyer presented a solid case, including the eviction notice and recordings of phone calls where I repeatedly asked Karen to vacate the premises, which she blatantly refused. In my state, squatting was a serious offense, resulting in Karen being charged with a Class A misdemeanor. The look of utter defeat and humiliation on her face was deeply satisfying after enduring years of her antagonism. After the court proceedings, Michael and Karen, still unable to accept the defeat, confronted me at Judy's place, where I had been staying. "How could you do that to my little sister?" Michael demanded. "Your little sister has made my life miserable for years, and I finally put a stop to it in the only way I knew how," I replied, my frustration evident. "A decision you initially agreed with. Yet the moment I stood up for myself, you sided with her." Michael argued, "So the house suddenly became an option because we're separating. If we weren't, would you have snuck her in?" I cut him off. "Save it, Michael. I don't want to hear any more. I'll see you in court." "How is the house even in your name?" "My brother's name isn't on any of the documents. I've been paying off the mortgage and handling repairs for the past 4 years," I explained. "No matter how much your brother contests it, he won't gain any ownership of the house. All he'll get is a much lighter wallet." Karen interjected, clearly not understanding the legal situation. "You think I set him up?" "I did nothing of the sort. Your brother believed in being the man of the house but avoided real responsibilities, preferring that I handle everything while he enjoyed the benefits. Thank God that won't be my problem anymore," I retorted, my patience wearing thin. I slammed the door in their faces, ending the conversation. In the weeks that followed, Michael, realizing he couldn't win the house, decided to contest every single possession we shared. down to the most trivial items like our dessert spoons. The battle was petty and exhausting, but I was determined to fight for my peace and freedom. For every item Michael claimed as his, I had the receipts clearly showing who had paid for them. In truth, he hadn't contributed much, so his share was minimal. While Michael was preoccupied with this petty squabble, I took action on another front. I sent screenshots of his inappropriate communications with Judy to his company's HR department. Within 2 weeks, Michael was terminated from his job. Surprisingly, Isabella was not. I learned from some of Michael's colleagues, with whom I had remained friendly, that she had argued Michael coerced her into the relationship by threatening her professional standing. Understandably, their relationship did not survive this revelation. It took some time, but eventually, the divorce was finalized, and I was officially free to celebrate my newfound freedom and the successful resolution of a complex situation. Judy and I enjoyed a long celebration. It felt like a double victory. The last update I received on Michael and Karen was less than glamorous. They ended up living together in a modest apartment, both struggling to find jobs. Their parents were supporting them with a modest allowance, but they were far from pleased with their actions. My former in-laws even reached out to apologize for their children's behavior, a gesture that helped bring some closure to the entire ordeal. Now free, I looked forward to what life had to offer next. The entire experience reinforced a valuable lesson: never forget my worth. It also showed me that I could handle myself in tough situations. A force to be reckoned with. Here's to moving forward stronger and wiser. Cheers. Pops is gone, huh? You're off to some facility starting tomorrow, my son declared coldly, as I sat there, still reeling from the grief of losing my husband. There wasn't even a hint of sorrow on his face for his father's death, just an unpleasant smirk. But don't worry, we'll make sure to properly inherit all of Dad's estate and the house. I was stunned. After not seeing him for so long, this was the first thing out of his mouth. His wife, standing beside him, seemed completely on board with inheriting everything too. They barely visited before, but now they show up just for this. There's no way I'd let them inherit anything. I'm Holly, married for 40 years. My husband and I had always talked about saving for retirement. We'll need about $1.3 million to retire comfortably, he'd say, and I'd agree. We'd worked hard and had some savings, enough that we wouldn't struggle immediately. But the worries never stopped. We do have a son, Kevin, but we haven't seen him in nearly 10 years. Who knows what he's doing now? We'd love to rely on him, but we can't depend on an absent son, especially with potential care needs in the future. Despite our worries, we managed to get by on our own, until one weekday afternoon when the doorbell rang. I thought it was a delivery, but when I checked the monitor, it was Kevin. He looked different from the last time I saw him, rougher, almost unrecognizable. "Hey, it's Kevin," I exclaimed, surprised, as my husband looked just as shocked. "Kevin? Really?" I rushed to open the door, and there he stood with an unfamiliar, flashy woman by his side. Who is this woman? I wondered, my mind racing with questions. Kevin, unfazed, stepped in and called the woman over. "What's going on? What's this all about?" I asked, confused. "Well, I'm getting married to her," Kevin announced casually. After being absent for so long, he dropped one surprise after another, leaving my husband and me speechless. The woman, who introduced herself as Sophie, spoke up. "Nice to meet you, I'm Sophie." Just like that, it seemed they were ready to leave after a brief greeting. "Wait, after so long, can't we talk a bit more?" I asked, not wanting to hold them for long but hoping to chat more with my son and his fiancé. "Please take good care of Kevin," I added, trying to be polite. But Sophie's response was cold and firm. "I'm going to marry Kevin, but I have no intention of becoming part of your family." My husband and I were dumbfounded, unable to say anything as they left. That kind of response only amplified our worries about the future. 6 months have passed since Kevin and Sophie got married, and we haven't seen them once since that initial introduction. We're worried, but as long as our son and his wife are happy, that's all that should matter, or so we tried to tell ourselves. Then Kevin began contacting us occasionally. At first, it should have been a joy to hear from him, but the content of his calls was concerning. "Hey, I'm a bit short on cash. Can you send me $1,000? I'll send you the account details later. It was always about money. He never showed any concern for us, just one-way demands, and it wasn't just once, it was several times a month. We knew this wasn't good. We wanted Kevin to stand on his own, but our concern for our only son made us give in. After discussing it, we complied with his requests. I wish he'd be smarter with his money, I'd say. The early days of marriage are expensive and we hardly did anything for him when he was young. This is partly our responsibility, my husband would add. For a while, we continued to provide funds to Kevin, but recently he started calling almost daily asking for more money. We realized that if this continued, we wouldn't be able to sustain our own lives. One day, I decided it was time to tell Kevin we couldn't provide any more assistance. When he called, I said, "Kevin, I have something to discuss about money." "What? You're calling to say you'll transfer money?" he asked, sounding disinterested. "No, that's not it. We can't send any more money. We have our own lives to live." "Fine, whatever," he responded, surprisingly calm. I thought we had finally reached an understanding, but my relief was short-lived. Barely an hour after we ended the call, Kevin stormed into our house, furious. "My life is a mess because of you too. It's your fault I dropped out of middle school. It's the parents' responsibility, right? If you can't give me money, then whatever happens is on you." Kevin stood before us, the very image of a delinquent. It's true that my husband and I were too busy with work when he was young and didn't spend enough time with him. Now, seeing him like this, I feared what might happen if we didn't help him. His angry gaze left me with little choice but to comply. "All right, how much do you need?" I asked hesitantly. "That's up to you," Kevin replied, his tone cold. It pained me to realize just how much our son resented us. For the time being, I handed him the $100 I had in my wallet. $100? You're joking, right? He scoffed. "No, this is really all I can do," I said, showing him my bank statement. It was the account we used for living expenses, not the one for savings, so it didn't have much in it. Moreover, it was just before my pension was due, so there was hardly anything left. "Is that so?" Kevin muttered as he pocketed the $100 and left without another word. After that incident, perhaps realizing he couldn't expect any more money from us, the calls from Kevin demanding money stopped. I thought we could finally live a peaceful retirement, until my husband was diagnosed with colorectal cancer shortly afterward. The doctor said that even with treatment, recovery wasn't expected, and only hospice care could be provided. I wanted him to live as long as possible, but he didn't feel the same. "I've had enough," he said, his voice weary. "If there's no hope of recovery, don't waste money. Think of your future and save what we have." Persuaded by my husband's wishes, I reluctantly agreed. I decided to let him spend his final days as he wished. A month later, he passed away peacefully. "You did well. This is for the best," I reassured myself, though losing my beloved husband left me in deep sorrow. The only comfort I had was knowing he spent his last moments without pain. Preparations for the funeral began immediately, but my role was minimal, just contacting people from a list my husband had prepared before his passing. The list included old friends, colleagues, and our son, Kevin. When I informed Kevin of his father's death, his response was indifferent. How cold-hearted, I thought, letting out a sigh. On the day of the funeral, the service went smoothly and many came to offer their condolences, but there was no sign of my son or his wife. I hadn't expected them to show up. As I was greeting mourners, I saw Kevin and Sophie arrive, just casually in what looked like loungewear. Unbelievable. I tried to ignore them, but they approached me. "So, the old man finally kicked the bucket, huh? You should just go into a care home starting tomorrow," were the first words out of Kevin's mouth. My anger surged at his smirking face and the callous suggestion. Just as I was about to retort, Sophie chimed in. "Don't worry, we'll properly inherit the estate and the house." What on earth were they thinking? "There's no inheritance for you to receive," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. They had barely been in our lives, yet here they were, acting as if they had a right to everything. I wanted to lash out, but I couldn't bring myself to do it at my husband's funeral. "We'll talk later. For now, just offer your incense," I said quietly, trying to suppress the trembling in my voice. Then, I heard a familiar voice. "Same as always," said Mr. Smith, an old friend of my husband's and, as it turned out, a lawyer. He might know something about this inheritance issue. When I briefly explained the situation to him, he assured me he would help me disinherit Kevin. After the ceremony ended and the mourners had left, only Mr. Smith, my son, his wife, and I remained at the funeral parlor. Did Dad leave a $2 million inheritance? Give it to us, quickly, Kevin demanded, smirking as usual while Sophie looked on expectantly. They must have thought they were entitled to everything, but I had no intention of giving them a cent. I'll make this clear, you won't be getting any inheritance, I stated firmly. Kevin, stunned by my words, reacted with anger. What? You've got to be joking. That's impossible, you can't do that. You think it's not allowed, I replied calmly. Why don't we confirm with Mr. Smith here? I've already left the inheritance matters in his hands, so it's out of mine. Kevin scoffed dismissively. What are you even saying? I don't care about some irrelevant old man. His vulgar language made me feel a deep shame, regretting that I had raised a son who would argue about inheritance at his father's funeral. Disgusted by his attitude, I turned to Mr. Smith and asked, please explain the situation. Of course, Mr. Smith began. Kevin, do you remember me? I don't know you. Who the hell are you? Kevin snapped, his tone aggressive. Mr. Smith remained calm and undisturbed. That's a shame. We used to play together when you were little. Kevin, uninterested in past memories, demanded, so what? You're here to talk about Dad's estate, right? I'm the one who'll inherit it. When Kevin returned to the topic of inheritance, Mr. Smith's expression sharpened. Kevin, you have no right to inherit. What? What nonsense are you spouting? Kevin shot back. Remember your delinquent behavior as a teenager that involved the police, Mr. Smith continued. And as an adult, you accumulated significant debt without your mother's knowledge, which your father had to repay. I know everything. I had just learned these details from Mr. Smith, aware of Kevin's past misdeeds, but completely blindsided by the massive debt he had created, which my husband had quietly covered. So what? Kevin spat. It's a parent's duty to take care of their child. Besides, there's no doubt I'm his son, so naturally, I have a right to the inheritance. Kevin moved toward Mr. Smith in a rage, with Sophie equally furious by his side. It's impossible that Kevin doesn't have any inheritance rights. Everyone knows a person's own child would have rights. Are you a real lawyer, or is that just a lie? She demanded. Their loud arguments drew the attention of the funeral parlor's security guards, who rushed over in a panic. Is there a problem here? One of the guards asked, trying to calm them down as he approached me for details. I felt embarrassed to have others involved in this family conflict. I'm sorry, it's just a family dispute. I apologized sincerely to the guard. We truly didn't mean to cause any trouble. While I bowed my head in apology, Kevin and Sophie continued to struggle. Let go. What do you think you're doing? Ouch, that hurts. Stop it, old man, they shouted, their disrespectful behavior finally pushing me to the brink. Enough, I snapped. Your attire and behavior are completely inappropriate for a funeral. You're causing a scene and disturbing everyone around you. Knock it off. I was aware my voice was getting louder, and the couple, who hadn't expected me to get this angry, suddenly quieted down. Mr. Smith leaned in and whispered to me, Don't worry, there's no way Kevin will inherit. Your father prepared a contingency plan. A contingency plan, I repeated, unsure of what he meant. But Mr. Smith continued, It's time to confront Kevin with the hardship he's caused you. He patted my back reassuringly. I couldn't indulge my son's selfishness any longer and approached them calmly. Enough already, I said firmly. That's my line, Kevin retorted. All this could end if you just agree to let me inherit. I've told you countless times, it's impossible for you to inherit, I replied, moving closer with each step. Kevin's face turned pale as he noticed my approach. You come to your father's funeral with a disrespectful attitude after causing trouble for others your entire life. You truly have no respect for your parents, I said coldly, leering at him. No, but that's because of you too. You were never home when I was a kid, Kevin protested, always quick to make excuses when cornered. Yes, we weren't home, and I regret that, I admitted. But many kids grow up in similar situations and don't spend their lives blaming their parents. It's pathetic to rely on your parents even as an adult. Kevin trembled silently, his head bowed. Whether from anger or sorrow, I couldn't tell, but I knew he was listening. It was time to resolve this once and for all. Mr. Smith, please use the last resort you mentioned earlier. I had no idea what this last resort entailed, but it seemed like the only way to break through the current situation. In response, Mr. Smith handed me an envelope. Inside was a document titled Final Judgment Certificate of Inheritance. "What's this?" I asked, perplexed by the contents. I stared at the document in my hands, confused. "What does this mean?" I asked, both Kevin and Sophie looking on with curiosity. Kevin, cornered and defiant, shifted uneasily. Mr. Smith began to explain quietly, "During his lifetime, your father filed a court petition stating that he did not want Kevin to inherit any of his estate. This document proves that his petition was accepted." Kevin and Sophie were clearly shaken by this revelation, and I was struggling to grasp the situation. "When did this happen?" I asked, bewildered. "Your father asked me to keep it a secret from you," Mr. Smith continued. "Now that he has passed away, I believed it was the right time to present this document to you." "What does this mean?" Kevin demanded, his voice tinged with frustration. "Are you saying my father decided to cut me out of the inheritance? Why would he do that? Can this just be ignored?" Mr. Smith explained further, "Normally, a husband's estate would be inherited by his spouse and children. However, under certain circumstances, one can apply to disinherit a specific person. This is known as disinheritance." "So you're telling me my father took this step to exclude me?" Kevin's anger was palpable. "Is there any way this can be ignored?" I had never heard of such a measure before. The reality that my husband had gone to great lengths to ensure Kevin wouldn't inherit was sinking in. Mr. Smith added, "Unfortunately, it cannot be ignored. It has been legally recognized by the court and the procedure is legally valid. Additionally, considering the significant debt Kevin has caused your father over the years, it's understandable why he would want to avoid leaving an inheritance." I had not been aware of the extent of Kevin's debt. "How much debt did my son leave for my husband to cover?" "It was $40,000, Mr. Smith replied. "Your husband was prepared to handle it himself rather than have Kevin demand money from him every month. There was an agreement that Kevin would repay it, but he broke that promise, which left your husband very angry." I was shocked by this revelation and turned to Kevin, who remained silent. His silence spoke volumes. "If you're going to be silent, then fine. Just leave," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and despair. "I never want to see either of you again," I said firmly. "You understand that you won't be inheriting anything." Kevin's defiant attitude persisted. "But surely there's something." My patience snapped. "Leave, you ungrateful son. Our ties are severed. Never come to see me again." Startled by my outburst, Kevin and Sophie quickly exited the room. I saw Kevin stumble in his haste and fall to the floor. "Mr. Smith, thank you. I don't know what I would have done without your help," I said, my voice filled with gratitude. "It was your husband's last wish," Mr. Smith replied. "Now you can find peace knowing his wishes were honored." Thanks to Mr. Smith's support, I was able to protect my late husband's inheritance. Without his assistance, I might have been forced into a difficult situation, vulnerable to Kevin and Sophie's demands. Kevin had never changed, and I no longer considered him my son. He and his wife could fend for themselves. I planned to ensure they received nothing from me. With these thoughts, I left the funeral. A week later, while sorting through my husband's belongings, the phone rang. "Hello, is this Miss Holly?" The voice on the other end was from the police. "Yes, it is. How can I help you?" "We have a son named Kevin, correct? We found 2 children living in a flat under his name, and they've been taken into protective custody." I was stunned. "What's the situation? Are these children my sons?" The officer continued, "We're also searching for Kevin but haven't located him yet. Could you please come to the station?" "I'll be right there," I replied, feeling a mix of dread and curiosity. Upon arriving at the station, I immediately recognized the children. They were about 2 years old and bore a striking resemblance to Kevin when he was young. No birth certificates had been filed, likely due to financial troubles. The landlord had reported them after discovering debt collection letters scattered near the children. They had probably been abandoned during a desperate escape. It was heartbreaking to see such young children in this situation. "Would you consider placing them in a care facility?" the officer asked. "No, I'll take them in," I responded immediately. Since then, I've faced the challenges of childcare, but my days have been fulfilling with the children. Years have passed since I took them in, and there's been no word from Kevin and his wife. I tell the children that their father might be gone or somewhere else, but they won't see him again. The abandonment must have left a deep wound in their hearts, but I am committed to supporting and caring for them as they grow. Hi, I'm Shirley, a 31-year-old office worker. A year ago, I married Mason, a man I met on a blind date. After a year and a half of dating, he proposed. Settling down had always been my dream, so even though the proposal felt a bit hasty, I said yes. In hindsight, I realized I should have taken a more cautious approach. Not long after our wedding, Mason made a surprising decision to switch jobs. When I asked him about it, he explained that his previous position didn't allow him to fully showcase his skills. What stunned me even more was his announcement that he had already resigned and would be leaving by the end of the month. Thankfully, he found another job quickly, but it came with a lower salary than his last position. At first, I wasn't too worried since I had my own job, but then Mason started pushing me to quit. I might have considered it if his new salary had been enough to support us both, but with his recent job change, his pay was lower. He kept insisting it would go up soon, yet there was no indication of when that might happen. Quitting my job under such uncertain financial circumstances felt risky. We relied on my income to save and cover essential expenses like rent and car payments. Depending solely on Mason's current salary just wasn't practical. One evening, Mason handed me divorce papers, seemingly to intimidate me. "You know I'm ready for this whenever," he challenged. I urged him to take a breath and rethink his words, but he simply stood up and retreated to his room. That confrontation left me reflecting on the hasty decisions and unexpected changes that had occurred since I met Mason. I firmly told him I wouldn't quit my job until his salary improved. At first, he seemed to accept my stance, but the topic kept coming up. Each time he mentioned it, I stood my ground with the same unwavering response. Now, a year into our marriage, Mason's salary still hadn't changed, yet he kept pressuring me to quit my job. "When are you going to leave?" he would ask, and I often felt the urge to respond sarcastically. However, I knew our financial stability hinged on my income. If it was so crucial for me to resign, I believed Mason should focus on advancing his own career instead. As time passed, I began to understand why Mason was so adamant about my leaving work. This became evident during our visits to his parents' house. Whenever we were with his mother, Martha, Mason would feign concern, claiming he wanted to ease her burden. She would express her gratitude, and then he would glance at me pointedly, as if nudging me toward resignation. He suggested she needed help, but Martha was anything but helpless. She was active, healthy, and even held a part-time job that funded her hobbies and social life. It was clear she didn't require my assistance, yet Mason continued to push for my departure. "If only one of us could be home during the day, we could check on Mom every day," Mason said one day, seemingly out of nowhere. It was clear he envisioned me visiting Martha daily, which felt overwhelming and unnecessary. I asked him directly what he expected me to do since Martha was perfectly capable on her own. He listed off mundane tasks like helping with housework and running errands. It was obvious he had plans for how I could contribute, but none of them justified leaving my career. This endless cycle of requests and justifications was exhausting. I needed Mason to realize that while I was willing to support his family when needed, giving up my job without a solid reason was not something I could take lightly. "But Martha has her part-time job and spends most of her days out with friends, right?" I pointed out when he suggested I could take care of housework during the day. His response left me puzzled. Was he really implying I should become his mother's maid? Mason was deeply concerned about maintaining a certain image, especially in front of his parents. If he was so eager to take care of them, why couldn't he handle the household chores himself? Despite his persistent pressure, I stood firm in my decision not to quit my job. I also opted not to visit my in-laws on my days off, though I did make an effort to see them during major holidays like New Year's. As I reflected on our visits, a pattern emerged. Mason frequently delegated tasks to me, asking me to tidy up, assist his mom, or run errands. I pushed back against these requests. When he suggested I go to the store, I would reply, "Don't you know this area better than I do?" His standard excuse was that it wouldn't look right if he did it himself. A rationale I found both puzzling and manipulative. It seemed he was more focused on controlling the situation and projecting an image of family care than on genuinely caring for his parents or me. As time passed, my perception of Mason changed. It became clear that he was more focused on appearances than on genuine affection or respect for me. When I finally confronted him, asking why he didn't help out or even consider quitting his job to care for his mother, his reaction spoke volumes. He looked both disgusted and uncomfortable, replying, "That's not something I'm supposed to do." I'm giving you these instructions so my mom thinks you're a considerate, useful wife. You should appreciate how kind I'm being." His words were revealing. He essentially wanted to shift all the demanding tasks onto me while showcasing his virtue as if it were something extraordinary. But I am neither his servant nor his subordinate, and I certainly didn't deserve to be disrespected in front of my in-laws. It became increasingly clear that Mason's priorities were misaligned, valuing appearances over genuine partnership and support. If he continued with these unreasonable demands, I refused to stay silent. I will stand my ground. Despite our numerous discussions, Mason hasn't changed. He keeps pestering me with the same question. Are you going to quit your job? Furthermore, every time we visit my in-laws, he continues to boss me around as he always has. After reaching my breaking point, I realized it was time for a serious conversation. "We need to talk about our future," I said, hoping to guide our discussion towards something constructive. "What are you even trying to say?" Mason shot back, clearly annoyed. "I'm honestly fed up. I'm tired of you constantly asking when I'll quit my job, and I'm exhausted from the pressure to take care of Martha," I expressed, laying out my grievances. "Why are you so upset about that? You're my wife, and it's your duty to care for my parents," Mason retorted. "Don't you think it's unfair to place that responsibility solely on me? Shouldn't you, as their biological child, the one helping with the housework and caring for them?" I challenged, confronting his outdated views. "No way. It's the wife's duty to do it." "Are you the kind of person who doesn't care about family?" Mason accused, clearly upset by my resistance. "I'm disappointed to hear you say that," he added. Seizing the moment to highlight the double standard, I asked, "Then let me ask you this. How have you been caring for my parents? If I asked you to take care of them, would you do it?" Mason stared at me blankly, struggling to understand the connection. "What are you saying? Why should a husband be responsible for his wife's parents? So does that mean you won't ever take care of my parents?" I pressed, aiming to highlight his inconsistency. "The husband's parents and the wife's parents are totally different," Mason replied, missing the point entirely. "What difference does that make?" "I don't understand," I said, feeling increasingly frustrated. "I didn't realize you were so out of touch. It's like talking to my old boss." "What are you trying to say?" Mason asked, clearly confused. "I'm saying that a husband should take care of his own parents, and you should support your wife's family too," I replied, trying to emphasize the importance of mutual support and equality in our responsibilities. I felt the need to clarify, so I added, "So you only prioritize your own blood relatives? I'm really disappointed in you. I won't be visiting your parents anymore." "Why would you do that?" "Enough is enough. I'm the one who wants you to stop this nonsense," he shot back. "No way. How dare you talk to me like that? My mom is right," Mason exclaimed, his temper flaring. "Ha, your mom was talking about you. She said you're a badly behaved husband. That's why she gave me this," he said, pulling a piece of paper from his bag. It was divorce papers. "What? You had divorce papers ready?" I asked, shocked, but Mason looked oddly proud of himself. "See? I scared you, didn't I? I'm ready for this anytime, so think about what you just said," Mason declared smugly before heading to his room. Unbelievable. Why is Mason so selfish? I thought, fuming. That triumphant look on his face made it clear that the divorce papers were just a threat to manipulate me. The fact that Martha was involved only fueled my suspicion. Mason was acting like a puppet for his mom, trying to control me while following her orders. It was ridiculous. I wouldn't let him have his way. How could he not see that our marriage was in serious trouble with this behavior? His lack of understanding only frustrated me further. Mason had already completed the divorce papers and handed them to me with witnesses present, including Martha and his friends. This meant I could sign and file them whenever I wanted. The next day after Mason left for work, I filled out the divorce papers and submitted them to the city office as a precaution. I also filed a notice of non-acceptance of the marriage certificate. Knowing Mason might threaten to file a marriage certificate on his own, I called my parents to explain the situation. When they learned I had prepared the divorce papers, they were initially shocked but quickly rallied behind my decision. Outraged by Mason's behavior, they offered to help me move my belongings right away. Taking a leave from work, I had my parents come over, and together we relocated all my things to their house while Mason was out. I decided to stay with my parents for a while. For the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely comfortable and at ease in their home. Reflecting on my marriage, it became clear that Mason never contributed his fair share to our household chores. I was the one cooking dinner after long workdays and managing all the cleaning and laundry on my days off. On top of that, he expected me to care for his parents, which simply wasn't feasible. That evening, Mason called, likely just back from work. "Hey, where are you right now?" he asked. "I'm at my parents' house," I replied. "Oh, why would you go back there without my permission? And where's all your stuff? Don't tell me you're staying the night," he questioned, his tone a mix of surprise and selfishness. I almost laughed at how oblivious he was to the seriousness of the situation, thinking I was just staying overnight when I had actually taken most of my belongings with me. "I'm not coming back," I said firmly. "What are you talking about? Come back here and make me some food," he demanded. "Make it yourself," I replied, ending the call. I couldn't engage in a conversation about divorce while he continued to be so dismissive. To find some peace, I decided to block his number and wait for him to come to my parents' house. A week later, Mason arrived at my parents' home, accompanied by his parents. They all wore serious expressions as we faced off in the living room, 3 against 3. "How could you do this? How could you leave without my permission?" Mason demanded, incredulity and accusation lacing his voice. "You treated me like a housekeeper, Mason. All I ever asked was for you to take responsibility for your family," I replied, stating my ground. "That's not true. What kind of wife would I be if I didn't take care of Mason?" Martha shot me a fierce glare. My father began to tremble with anger, but I quickly intervened. Mason insisted that I quit my job to care for Martha, claiming it was my duty as his wife. Yet when it comes to my own family, he expects me to manage everything alone. Ultimately, Mason seeks obedience, using me to take care of his parents while taking all the credit. That's why he prioritizes his parents over mine. "Have you ever heard Mason say these things?" I asked. Martha continued to glare, but Lamb looked confused, as if he hadn't known about any of this before. "Let me clear the air," Mason interjected, waving the divorce papers and claiming it was all Martha's idea. "Why would you say that?" Lamb asked, clearly taken aback. "Oh no, it's because Camila has an attitude problem," Martha stammered. "And did you really say that Camila's parents aren't a priority?" I pressed. "Well, it's only natural for your parents to come first," Martha shot back defensively. "Don't be absurd. I came here to support you after hearing about the unfair treatment Camila has faced, but it seems you're the one at fault. Don't hide behind her parents' authority to manipulate the situation," Liam said, causing Mason to visibly shrink in his seat. Liam then turned to me and my parents, offering an apology. "I'm truly sorry for the trouble caused by my foolish son. I will have a serious talk with him." "Liam, you're not to blame at all, so please don't apologize," I replied. "Thank you for your understanding, but there's something else I need to address." I turned to Mason, who now looked nervous. "The divorce papers you gave me? I've already filed them. We're no longer married." Mason and Martha both turned pale. "Why did you file those without my permission?" Mason demanded, his shock evident. "You told me I could file them whenever I wanted. Besides, you filled out your part and had Martha sign as a witness," I calmly explained, leaving Mason momentarily speechless. Seeing the escalating tension, Liam intervened, furious. "Mason, you used divorce as a threat," he exclaimed, and in a moment of rage, slapped Mason across the face. Martha looked visibly shaken by the scene. Liam then turned to me and offered a sincere apology. "I sincerely apologize that you had to witness this. You have every right to divorce this fool. On behalf of Mason, I'm truly sorry for the damage done to your marriage," Liam said, tightening his grip on Mason's collar as he demanded apologies from both him and Martha before ushering them out of the house. Later, I expressed my gratitude to Liam for his intervention. He reassured me that all of Mason's assets and property would be transferred to me without any complications, considering my higher income and the effort I had invested in managing our household. It was a relief to know I had secured everything from our marriage. I later learned that Liam had divorced Martha, clearly appalled by her behavior. One day, I bumped into a colleague from Mason's former workplace who had some surprising news. Mason hadn't been performing well at his job and was frequently criticized by his boss. In a fit of defiance, he resigned and switched jobs, which only deepened my frustration with him. Instead of owning up to his shortcomings, he chose to blame others, which likely contributed to his lower pay at the new position. Now, I feel a sense of relief having left him behind. I've rented a cozy apartment and am enjoying my newfound independence. Work is going well. and I'd even received a raise recently. For now, I'm not interested in dating. I prefer to focus on my career. Mason was always more concerned with appearances than with genuine skills. He put on a show at home but never made any real progress in his career. It's unfortunate how some spouses resort to using divorce threats as a way to feel powerful. It's a major misstep. I hope they eventually recognize their mistakes and find happiness on their own. As for me, I'm grateful to have moved on from Mason and look forward to the possibility of meeting someone special when I'm ready.
No way, that's impossible. We're living together. You just need to sign the divorce papers. Good luck with your poor life. I stood there in a daze, holding the phone after the call was abruptly cut off. The lawyer couldn't help but burst into laughter. Jessica looked at the lawyer with a puzzled expression. The lawyer was wiping tears with a handkerchief. The CEO is actually Linda. My name is Linda. I've been married to my husband Mike for 2 years. We don't have children. We both work and are so busy that we often work on weekends. We hardly have time for long conversations, leading to a life of passing each other by. Therefore, we try to match our schedules and go on overseas trips during our long breaks. It's only once a year, but we both look forward to it. When we got married, we decided to buy an upper-floor condo in a Bay Area tower. It was a stretch, but we did it considering the future value of the asset. Thanks to that, we're satisfied with our current life. I have a close friend from high school, Jessica. We sometimes go out for lunch together. Jessica, being beautiful, has high standards for men. She's not married yet but has a strong desire to do so. She's always looking for well-educated, high-income men on dating apps. Especially, she won't compromise on income. One day, I was enjoying lunch with Jessica at a cafe near a park. We were together in high school and university, even in the same classes. That's why we've consulted each other about various things. As a result, we know quite a bit about each other's dating histories and types. During our student days, we shared both fun and sad times. Those are good memories. Since I married Mike 2 years ago, we've both become busy, and the time we can meet has decreased. Now we meet only a few times a year, if that. Hey, can I come visit your condo next time? Jessica suddenly asked me. Jessica had never been to my place before. Then on the weekend, Jessica came over to my place. I could sense her amazement even through the intercom at the entrance. Jessica kept saying, "This is amazing." The moment I opened the front door, Jessica looked impressed. "Wow, this place is like a mansion. And that elevator ride up was so long." I chose a spacious upper-floor condo because it was a once-in-a-lifetime purchase without compromising. It's even more spacious than a house. It's beautiful, really incredible. Jessica looked around the house, turning her head in every direction. Great location and an upper floor in a high-rise like this must have cost a pretty fortune. Jessica asked with a sly smile. Yeah, it's what you'd call a $1 million condominium. It's got great security too. Look here. Jessica cut me off, reacting only to the term $1 million condominium. Right? It must be over $1 million. Your husband must be making a lot, she said, eyes wide with astonishment. That was so like Jessica. She's always had high standards for men, especially regarding their income. Mike's salary is quite high for his age, I guess, I said vaguely. I felt it was tacky to be too explicit. Huh. She had a look that seemed to have some ulterior motive. Jessica said, "Can I use your bathroom?" and left the living room. I told Jessica where the bathroom was and then started preparing tea in the kitchen. Concerned about Jessica, who was taking a while to return, I was about to head to the bathroom when Jessica came back. Just replying to an email. Jessica doesn't usually make excuses like that. I felt a slight sense of unease while enjoying the cookies Jessica brought as a gift and having tea. She asked, "Can I stay till evening?" She apparently wanted to greet Mike. Indeed, it had been since our wedding that Jessica last saw Mike. It's not unnatural for her to want to see him. I decided to check with Mike just in case. Mike happily agreed. I might finish work early, he replied in an email. I assured Jessica that it was okay, and then I began preparing dinner. Jessica was initially engrossed in her smartphone, but eventually stood up and headed to the bathroom again. Unaware of the prolonged absence while cooking, I noticed when Jessica returned, she was wearing a necklace that seemed oddly familiar. It was mine. Staring at the necklace, Jessica flashed an embarrassed smile. How do I look? Does it suit me? She posed like a model. Stunned, I observed as Jessica started laughing, saying, "Oh, come on. I'm just kidding. I just found it and thought it was cute. It must have been super expensive, right? A premium piece for sure." She rambled like a child trying to justify her actions, labeling it a gift for Mike. Wow, he must be really wealthy to afford something like this. Jessica sighed. However, the necklace was stored in the closet in the bedroom. Jessica must have pretended to go to the bathroom and instead went to the bedroom, peeking into the closet. That's what it seemed like. I couldn't believe her actions, but I didn't want to come off as petty, so I emphasized that it was a precious item. Taking advantage of my lack of reprimand, Jessica made an outrageous request. Can I borrow this necklace for a while? I've got a date with a doctor I met on a dating app, and I want to wear it for that, please, she pleaded, joining her hands together as if praying. Reluctantly, I decided to lend it to her, emphasizing the need for careful handling, as it was a gift for Mike. As soon as Jessica knew she could borrow it, she smiled and began caressing the necklace. Of course, I understand she seemed to pay no mind to my words. When I finished the meal prep, I pretended to go to the bathroom to check the bedroom. Sure enough, the closet in the bedroom and the chest beside the bed weren't fully closed. Jessica must have opened every drawer and door she could find. There were fingerprints on the jewelry, watches, and precious metals. Jessica might have touched things, but probably didn't intend to borrow them. The shoes seemed to have been forced on, and the heels were misshapen. This was clearly going too far. Returning to the living room, I confronted Jessica. You touched various things in the bedroom, didn't you? The shoes were misshaped, and there were fingerprints on the watch. Rather than appearing remorseful, Jessica puffed out her cheeks a bit. Please don't do that again, she said. Jessica returned to her normal expression and apologized, saying sorry. Not wanting to dwell on this and risk straining our friendship, I decided to just lightly laugh it off. That's when Mike came home, holding a box of cake. Mike and Jessica saw each other for the first time since our wedding. It was awkward at first, but they gradually warmed up to each other, making for a lively dinner. By the time we ate the cake Mike brought, they were chatting like good friends. While I was clearing the dishes and washing up, they were laughing together. My boss is terrible, right? I envy Mike's subordinates. Mike was grinning, eyes crinkling with laughter. That's not true. I was a bit bothered by Jessica casually touching Mike. But at the time, I thought it was better than them being distant. After all, Mike wasn't the type of man Jessica usually goes out with. About a month after Jessica's visit, Mike's behavior started to change. He spent more time on his smartphone, which he usually didn't do much. He often seemed distracted when I talked to him and asked me to repeat myself. He always carried the phone with him, even taking it to the bathroom. It was an obvious change, and it seemed I had become a cheated-on wife. Contemplating checking Mike's phone, I hesitated to even touch it. Conversations between Mike and me at home became increasingly rare, and he started working on weekends much more. Mike was hardly ever at home on weekends, and while we barely saw each other on weekdays originally, now not seeing each other on weekends too felt like living separately within the same house. Moreover, we started sleeping in separate bedrooms under the pretext of his tiredness. Vaguely considering divorce or separation, I stumbled upon divorce papers on the living room table one day. Upon closer inspection, Mike had already signed them. Though I had suspected it, actually seeing it still shook me. With trembling hands, I called Mike. questioning him about the unexpected discovery. I just got home and saw it on the table. What does this mean exactly? I inquired, hoping for clarification. Mike's response struck me hard. It's what it looks like. I want a divorce, he declared, leaving me stunned. Pressing him for a proper reason, Mike dropped the bombshell. I've fallen in love with someone else. It's not an affair. I'm serious. With disbelief, I heard a familiar female voice on the phone, Jessica. It was what I had suspected. I'm dating Mike, and I even want to marry him, Jessica admitted nonchalantly. Hearing the confirmation made my heart race and brought on a cold sweat. Jessica's crude way of talking hinted at a side of her I hadn't seen before. Mike echoed, "There's nothing left to talk about. Can you just sign the divorce papers and send them off? I want to talk things over, so please tell Mike to come home." Stunned by the abrupt ending of the phone call, I couldn't move for a while. Sleepless nights persisted as Mike didn't come home, and I couldn't bring myself to touch the divorce papers. Jessica continued to torment me by sending multiple photos of her and Mike together, flaunting their relationship. My mental health deteriorated, and my complexion worsened. People around me became worried, urging me to seek medical help. Reluctantly, I ended up in treatment, managing to regain some peace with medication. An unbelievable incident unfolded upon my return from the hospital. Something felt off inside the room, and upon checking the bedroom, I discovered that bags and jewelry were missing. The count of jewelry watches in the chest was off too. There was only one person who could do this. Jessica. Questions swirled in my mind. Why would she do something like this? What had I ever done to her? My insomnia relapsed, and sleepless nights continued, leaving me staggering through my days. During counseling at the hospital, when I mentioned the theft at home, I was strongly advised to consult a lawyer. I promptly contacted the company's lawyer and set up an appointment, stating my clear intention. I'll get a divorce. I want those two to face proper consequences. I responded immediately, surprising even myself. Just a little while ago, I was pondering what to do, and I couldn't believe how easily those words came out of my mouth. Perhaps I really wanted to punish them after being tormented so one-sidedly. It was just about getting back at them. Now, a week later, I received a message from Jessica. I had sent her a certified letter. Hey, what are you thinking, sending a certified letter to my workplace? Jessica sounded pretty angry, her voice filled with rage. You must have expected at least this much. Anyway, I'm leaving everything to my lawyer now. I hung up the phone. Jessica called several times after that, but I ignored all of them. Then Mike called. I had sent a certified letter to his parents' house. Apparently, his affair being exposed at home caused a huge uproar. I wanted to burst out laughing at his self-inflicted predicament, but managed to restrain myself. Feeling that leaving it all to the lawyer wouldn't be enough to calm my feelings, I decided to confront them both. I would denounce them thoroughly on the spot. The lawyer arranged the date and time, and we decided to have the discussion at the law office. A few days later, the two reluctantly showed up at the law office. I thought they would bring their own lawyer, but it seemed they came alone. Jessica stormed into the office, flinging the door open. Mike followed, looking uncomfortable. Finally, we meet, you coward. Jessica made no effort to hide her anger, but Mike stepped forward, trying to calm her down. Well, you've been running away all this time. Our wedding's been delayed because of you. Jessica looked like she might throw her bag at me any moment, and Mike was desperately trying to hold her back as I watched them with a pitiful feeling. The lawyer nodded at me. Please calm down. If any violence or abusive language occurs, we will immediately call the police. Understood. The mention of the police made Jessica stiffen. With the lawyer's intervention, Jessica and Mike took their seats, becoming calmer. We sat across from each other at the office table, ready to start the discussion. Mike, you're seeking a divorce, correct? Jessica was sitting hotly, while Mike slumped, looking small. We'd agreed to the divorce. However, since your relationship is adultery, we will ask for alimony. Is there any significance to this? Mike's face clouded over. I'll agree to the divorce, but once the alimony is paid, don't contact us ever. I quietly nodded in agreement, and Jessica looked displeased, maybe expecting more resistance from me. When the lawyer began discussing the alimony amount, Jessica snapped. I said any amount is fine. We have plenty of money. Jessica sat arrogantly with her arms crossed. The lawyer looked at her with interest, saying, "Oh yes, didn't he research? Mike is the president of a jewelry company with a yearly revenue of $2 billion. Mike looked up frantically, trying to restrain Jessica's arm. Jessica, her face flushed, continued excitedly. Alimony for an affair is nothing to us. I'll even give a proper share of the property. Mike was trying hard to calm her down. Jessica shook off his hand and continued, You can barely make ends meet on your salary, right? She scoffed with a laugh. The lawyer burst into uncontrollable laughter. Jessica looked at him with a puzzled expression, and the lawyer wiped tears with a handkerchief. Actually, the president is Linda. Jessica was dumbstruck, her mouth hanging open. Mike hung his head, his body trembling slightly. Mike is just an ordinary employee with no position at Linda's company. I am Linda's corporate lawyer. Jessica started laughing loudly. What are you talking about? Are you really a lawyer? Can lawyers lie? The lawyer calmly replied, Why not ask Mike next to you if what I said is a lie? Mike, meanwhile, just bit his lip, looking down. Growing more anxious, Jessica grabbed Mike's arms and began shaking him. You said you were the president of a $2 billion jewelry company. That's not a lie, right? Mike remained silent, covering his face with his hands, uttering inaudible moans. Growing more desperate, Jessica gripped his arms tighter, repeatedly asking, Answer me. It's not a lie, right? Finally, Mike whispered in a raspy voice. I'm sorry. Mike's single apology plunged the room into a deep silence. Jessica's strength seemed to leave her body, and she let her hands that were gripping Mike fall limply. You said you were the president of a company making $2 billion a year, she muttered, almost to herself. Mike's solitary apology had plunged Jessica into despair. She stood up, trembling. It's a lie, right? There's no way you're the president. Jessica pointed at me accusingly. Why didn't I know about this after all we've shared? I spoke to Jessica calmly, as if guiding her. Just because we're close friends doesn't mean I tell you everything, especially since you were so fixated on money. I had no intention of telling you, I said, looking Jessica straight in the eyes without averting my gaze. Jessica seemed to lose all her energy and slumped down. Then that house, of course. The house is in my name, so Mike will be the one leaving. Jessica fell silent, and Mike continued to hold his head. Mike probably didn't want to come here. He knew this would happen. But if he didn't come here, things would be worse. It's hell either way for him now. Mike is left with nothing but hell waiting for him. The lawyer began to present the evidence I had gathered. First, the photos of Mike and Jessica together, the photos sent to my phone, now printed. The lawyer placed an IC recorder on the table and played the recorded conversation. Why would you send something like this? I just wanted to share our happiness with you. Jessica's voice filled the room, while Mike seemed to be holding back tears. Hey, still clinging to the past. I want to divorce quickly. I know what you're clinging to. It's Mike's income. He's the president of a $2 billion jewelry company, right? You hid it because you thought I might take it? Jessica, perhaps embarrassed, covered her face with her hands. Hurry up a divorce and leave that condo. It'll be mine soon. Too bad Mike didn't come back to you. I'll give you as much alimony as you want. Poor thing, your aim was the money, not Mike. I'm speechless at how you've been deceived. Mike and Jessica fell silent. Do you think this is over? What else is there, Jessica? You broke into the house when Linda wasn't there and stole several items, didn't you? I felt relieved at the lawyer's calm demeanor. Mike looked shocked, apparently unaware of this. Hey, what's this about stealing? Jessica bit her lower lip, her hands shaking. No, not me. I don't know anything. The lawyer placed a tablet on the table and played a video. It showed Jessica sneaking into the bedroom. taking bags and jewelry and stuffing them into her bag. Jessica stared wide-eyed at the footage. What is this? Why are you recording me? Isn't this illegal surveillance? Mike covered his face with his hands. We always had security cameras inside our house. Why didn't you tell me that earlier? Who would think you break into steal? I felt a headache coming on from their foolish exchange, and you used my key without permission. I wanted those things. It's your fault for not buying them for me. The two began arguing, ignoring us. The lawyer and I could only look on in disbelief. Please save your arguments for later. Regarding this theft, we will be filing a police report, the lawyer said calmly. Jessica seemed to panic at the mention of the police. That's a bit much, isn't it? I just borrowed something from a friend. I never gave you permission to borrow anything. I spoke to her calmly. Besides, you're not a friend or anything. You were just a classmate. That's why I'm filing a police report. Jessica started to kneel and apologize. I looked down at her and said coldly, "You're going to compensate. The value of what you stole is more than your annual income." Are you sure about that? Jessica was speechless. And there's also the matter of the alimony. Jessica turned to Mike, pleading in a tearful voice, "You'll pay, right? Even if you're not the president, you still earn well, right?" Mike was silent, looking down. "He can't pay it because he's about to be fired," I said. Mike looked up in surprise. That's correct. Since leaving the house, Mike has not shown up for work. Plus, with this commotion, there have been complaints from his boss, I explained. Mike looked like he might collapse on the floor. But there's still the property division, right? I'll pay with that, Jessica said desperately. That's not possible. Linda and Mike have a prenuptial agreement regarding property. You didn't hear anything from Mike, did you? He never told you the inconvenient truths, I replied calmly. I regarded Mike with disdain as the lawyer placed the contract on the table. The agreement explicitly stated that if the marriage lasted less than 3 years, neither party could claim the other's property. Given that they were currently in the 2nd year of marriage, Jessica attempted to grab the document as if to tear it up. You should handle that document carefully. It's a notarized deed, and you could be held legally accountable for damaging it, I warned. At the mention of potential legal consequences, Jessica halted her attempt to destroy the document and began to half-heartedly plead with Mike. Mike, you have savings, right? Use that to pay, she suggested. Mike, looking at Jessica with resentful eyes, retorted, What money? You always wanted sushi, steak. There's no way I have any savings left. It appears that way, and it seems he has debts from unsavory sources, I added. Jessica's shoulders slumped, revealing the pitiable sight of the once glamorous appearance that used to turn heads. This was the result of the seeds she had sowed herself, leaving the two looking haggard and lost, muttering about how this wasn't supposed to happen and what they would do now. Deciding to leave the rest to the lawyer, I stood up to leave, emphasizing to Jessica, money isn't something you steal from others. It's something you earn through effort. After that, the divorce proceeded smoothly. I sent all of Mike's belongings back to his parents, who kept apologizing to me and even sent a letter of apology. Jessica, on the other hand, faced police interrogation for illegal entry and theft, leading to her arrest after admitting guilt. Although she showed remorse and an intent to compensate, her other crimes, including stealing from men she met on a dating app, suggested she might face a prison sentence. Mike, unable to live in Jessica's apartment, moved to an old apartment on the outskirts of town. Despite looking for a job, his unexplained absences and poor attitude at his last job made it challenging to get hired. He resorted to day labor to get by, receiving regular updates on their situations from the lawyer. I threw myself into work after the divorce. Currently, I am expanding our company's jewelry line to Europe, an idea that emerged during a break I took after the divorce. During that time, I had the chance to connect with the owner of a jewelry store in France. We bonded over shared experiences of divorce, and he agreed to showcase my company's jewelry in his store. Focusing on sales in France, I considered it a well-deserved perk after all I had been through.
My name is Katie, and I'm a nurse. My husband Jack stays at home now. He used to work at a company, but he quit because he didn't get along with his new boss. When Jack told me he quit, I was mad because he didn't talk to me about it first. But then I tried to stay positive, thinking it might be better for him to leave the job before he got too unhappy. Even though Jack isn't earning money now, I have a stable job, and we live in a house my mother gave me before she passed away. So we don't have to pay rent, and we're managing fine. At first, I was worried and stressed about Jack not working. But since he's been doing a good job with the housework, I'm starting to get used to it and even enjoy it. One day, I came home from work and found my sister-in-law, Brittany, visiting. "Welcome home, honey," Jack said. "I hope you had a good day at work." Oh, I forgot to mention that Brittany was coming over. Sorry about that. I was a bit annoyed with Jack for not telling me in advance, but it was nice to see him so happy. "I understand. It's okay," I said. "But next time, please let me know ahead of time." Jack promised he would, and then he told Brittany it was time for her to leave. Brittany said, "I don't want to go yet. Since there's enough space here, I'd like to stay over tonight." I saw Jack looking worried, and he quickly said, "No, Brittany, it's too sudden. Please go home today." Brittany looked at me angrily and left. I was curious why Brittany came all the way over, especially since she had recently gone through a divorce and had nowhere else to go. She had moved back into my parents' small apartment, and they had asked her to find a job and help out with expenses, which made her feel unwelcome. I felt bad for her. After Brittany left, I told Jack how I felt. I didn't understand why he was so concerned about her. Jack explained, "I'm sorry about today. I've been looking for a job without success. I just needed someone to talk to, so I let her stay." I was upset with Jack for his thoughtless actions, but I knew he needed support. I said, "Okay, it's better to have someone around than to be alone in that situation. But next time, please call me and make sure she leaves before I get home." I wondered if I was being too lenient with Jack, but I made it clear that he needed to inform me ahead of time and didn't bring it up again. 2 days later, Jack texted me while I was at work. "Hey, hope your day is going well. Brittany wants to come over again. Is that okay with you? You're working until 9 p.m., right?" I was concerned about how long Brittany planned to stay. Even though Jack promised she would leave before 9 p.m., I replied, "Fine, but make sure she leaves as soon as possible." I really didn't want Brittany to come over, but seeing Jack happy about it made me willing to let him enjoy his time with his sister. It was a super busy day at work, and I completely forgot Brittany was coming. When I got home, Brittany was still there. "Why are you still here?" I asked. Jack saw I was upset and panicked. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I've been talking to Brittany for a long time and didn't realize the time. She'll leave now." Brittany, looking annoyed, said, "Yes, I'm going home now." She packed her things and left with a sigh. I didn't like her attitude, so I said, "What's her problem?" "It's not her house. Doesn't she have any manners?" Jack replied, "You're being too harsh. Brittany came all this way just to listen to me. I thought they could have met somewhere else, but I was too tired to argue." I said, "You're right, sorry. I'm just exhausted today, so I'm going to get some rest." I could tell Jack wanted to say more, but I was too tired and went to bed. The next day, on my day off, Jack brought up what happened. "I'm sorry about yesterday," he said. "I realized I should have been more considerate of you and Brittany. Since I hadn't had much time to talk with Jack lately and saw how much he wanted us to get along with Brittany, I said, I understand now. I've been so busy that I haven't made time for us. I did say too much yesterday. I'm sorry." Jack was relieved we talked it out. He said, "Okay, I'm making your favorite dish, meatball pasta. It'll be ready soon." After Jack started cooking, his phone rang. "Who's calling?" I asked. Jack said, "It's Brittany. I'm not sure why she's calling." I had a bad feeling and didn't want him to answer, but I suggested it might be important. Jack checked with me before picking up the phone. I couldn't hear Brittany's side of the conversation, but it ended quickly. I asked Jack, "What did Brittany want?" He replied, "She said she has something to tell me, so she's coming over now." I didn't understand why I had to deal with her on my day off and felt irritated. But since she was already on her way, I couldn't do much about it. Jack said, "I'll make pasta for Brittany too," and started cooking happily. He didn't realize I was upset, and I didn't understand why he didn't just say no to her visit. I decided this was a good time to address the issue with her directly. After about 10 minutes, the doorbell rang. I was surprised to see Brittany standing there with a large piece of luggage, given how far she was staying. I had a bad feeling but let her in. Jack was still cooking, so I asked Brittany, "What's going on?" Brittany, looking like she had been crying, said, "I got kicked out of my parents' place. They said I have no right to stay there because I'm not working. Aren't they terrible parents?" My bad feelings grew stronger as I listened. Jack responded, "That's awful. Families should help each other. They're terrible." I was irritated by Jack's reaction but kept quiet since it wasn't directly my issue. Brittany then said, "I have nowhere else to go, so I want to live here." I really didn't want Brittany to stay with us and tried to refuse, but before I could say anything, Jack said, "Well, there's no other option but for you to stay with us. Luckily, we have a spare room, so you can stay from today." I glared at Jack. "What's with that expression?" he asked. "Brittany needs help." I couldn't hold it in anymore and said, "What are you doing? Don't make decisions like this on your own." "Jack, you're not working, and neither is Brittany. I can't support both of you on my salary alone." Just then, something hit me on the head, and I was shocked. Brittany then said, "Jack, don't throw an egg at her." She was laughing hysterically, and when I touched my hair, I found eggshells. "It's your fault, Mary. Be nicer to Brittany. If you're going to be rude, we're getting a divorce. And if we get divorced, you'll have to leave this house." Jack looked at me with a smirk, and Brittany watched me with satisfaction. Since I didn't respond, they thought I was convinced. Jack said, "Mary, are you ready to apologize? If you are, go take a shower, and then we can eat the meatball pasta I made and discuss how we're all going to live together." Jack happily went back to cooking, while Brittany relaxed on the couch, snickering and watching TV. I had a lot to say to both of them, but for now, I grabbed Brittany's luggage and threw it off the balcony. They were shocked and yelled, "What are you doing? Are you out of your mind?" Jack panicked and told me to go get the stuff I had thrown out. But I replied, "Why should I? This is my house. I won't let you do anything more," I said firmly. Jack argued, "What are you talking about? This is our house. As husband and wife, it's my house too, and I'm letting my sister stay here." I just scoffed and laughed. Jack asked, "What's so funny? Don't you know I own this house?" I said, "It was given to me by my mother, so you have no claim to it." Jack and Brittany looked shocked. "Really? Oh no, that can't be right," they said. "Even if that's true, since we're married, it doesn't really matter." They started mumbling, so I said, "This house is mine. If you want to live with your sister so badly, why don't you rent a place for both of you? Also, why should I support people who aren't working? Jack, you worked hard until you quit, so I didn't say anything, but now you're not even doing housework. Honestly, I'd rather live alone." When I shared how I'd been feeling, Jack replied, "Oh really? So that's how you feel? Well, I don't want a wife who doesn't support my family and can't even appreciate me for taking care of the house." As he said this, Jack pulled out a divorce paper. Seeing how neatly it was prepared, I realized that Brittany must have come up with the idea. "I've already filled out my part," Jack said. "All you need to do is sign it. I'll give you some time to think. Just contact me when you want to apologize." After that, they both left. I quickly took a shower, signed the divorce papers, and went to submit them. I suspected that Jack had shown me the papers to scare me. Even though it was Brittany's idea, Jack went along with it, and I didn't want a husband who would do that to his wife. A few days later, Jack called and asked, "Are you ready to apologize?" I was furious and replied, "Shouldn't you be the one calling me first? I don't have time for this." Jack's condescending tone made me even angrier. I said, "Why are you calling me all of a sudden? Why should I contact you, a stranger now?" He responded, "What do you mean, a stranger? Is something wrong with you?" It was clear Jack didn't understand what was happening, so I told him calmly, "I've submitted the divorce papers and it's finalized. We're strangers now. Also, I sold the house, so even if you want to come back, it won't matter. I've quit my job and am starting fresh somewhere else. I've sent all your things to your parents and they should be arriving soon. I'm a bit worried though since their place is small. Will everything fit?" Jack sounded confused and started arguing with someone on his end of the phone. "Anyway, you were the one who suggested getting a divorce, right? I have nothing more to say to you, Since I want nothing to do with you, I'm going to block you. Goodbye. My ex-husband was shouting on the phone, but I didn't care. I hung up and blocked his number. A few months later, I was in the area where I used to live. While stopping by a supermarket, I saw someone who looked like Jack working there. It seemed he had made a mistake at work, and a much younger woman was scolding him. "How many times do I have to tell you? Don't make me repeat myself," she said, while other workers laughed. I felt a bit sorry for him, but he was just a stranger to me now. Maybe if Jack had handled his sister better, things might have turned out differently. Still, I'm glad I divorced him. I'm enjoying my life as a single person.